Africa is about to become the new geopolitical battlefield, where the world's superpowers are going to clash and compete for influence. And this is happening right under our noses. On today's episode of the Epic Times, we be talking about why Africa is about to become the next geopolitical battlefield where the world's superpowers are going to clash and compete for influence. We also talk about how China has just scored a massive victory in Africa and how it will have serious implications for America's relationship with Africa and what this means for the future of American foreign policy. First off, why is Africa the next geopolitical battlefield? Why is it that all of the world's powers are setting their eyes on Africa now? Well, there are three main reasons. 1. Natural resources. This continent is absolutely loaded with natural resources, especially oil, uranium, rare earth metals, which are critical for developing advanced technologies like semiconductors and electric vehicles. In fact, Africa has about 40% of the world's supply of gold and 92% of the world's supply of platinum. These resources are going to be essential for powering the world as we move forward, and they are also going to be critical for maintaining and sustaining military operations around the globe. And so all of the world powers, they want access to these resources to develop their economies and also to maintain their military operations. And this is one reason why they're all setting their sights on Africa. The second reason is demographics. The population of Africa is expected to triple by the year 2050. It's grow from 1.4 billion people to about 4.3 billion people by the end of the century. It's going to become the most populated continent on the planet, overtaking Asia, and so the powers of the world. They want to cultivate good relationships with African countries now because they know that in the future, these countries will hold tremendous amounts of political power. They could swing elections in the UN and help determine the future direction of humanity, and so the world powers. They re-looking at Africa's growing population, and they reinvesting heavily in the continent now so that they can curry favor with these countries and ensure that they have their support in the future. And then the third reason is geostrategic location. The continent of Africa is strategically located near some of the world's most important waterways, including the Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. It's also located near the Persian Gulf, which controls the world's energy supply. And it's also located near Europe, which is home to some of the world's most powerful economies and militaries. And so because Africa is located in such a strategic part of the world, it's very important for the powers of the world to establish strong beachheads here, so that they can protect their interests and also advance their ambitions. Now, these are the three main reasons why the continent of Africa is the next geopolitical battlefield where the world powers are gone, not clash, and compete for influence. And I think it's really important that we understand these reasons, because it helps us to see why this continent has been largely ignored in the past, and why now all of the world powers are competing to gain influence over the region. Now, over the last few decades, the United States has had a pretty hands-off approach when it comes to Africa. However, China has taken a completely different approach. China has been aggressively pursuing investment opportunities across the continent, and they've made significant inroads into Africa's economy. In fact, China is now Africa's largest trading partner, accounting for nearly 1/4 of all of Africa's trade. And this represents a huge opportunity for the Chinese, especially because most of these countries have a lot of raw materials that China needs to continue its economic growth. And so China has been more than happy to invest in these countries, extract their natural resources, and then use that wealth to build infrastructure and further their own ambitions. As one of the most notable examples of this is China's investment in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Congo is one of the most naturally resource-rich countries on the planet, and China has been investing billions of dollars in the country to extract its natural resources. In exchange, China has been building roads, schools, and hospitals in the Congo and helping to improve the lives of its citizens. And as a result, the Congolese people have become very fond of the Chinese and their government. And this is a major win for Beijing because it's allowed them to secure a foothold in one of the most important countries in Africa. Another example is Nigeria, which is the most populated country in Africa. Again, China has been investing heavily in Nigeria, building roads, railways, and even helping to develop the country's space program. And as a result, Nigeria has become China's largest trading partner in Africa. And again, this represents a major win for Beijing because they've been able to secure a beachhead in one of the most important countries on the continent. Now, there are two things that I want you to notice about these investments. First off, most of these investments are not in Western-aligned countries. China has very little presence in countries like Egypt and Morocco, which have strong ties with the West. Instead, China has focused its investments on countries that have traditionally been ignored by the West, countries like the Congo and Nigeria. And this shows that China is playing a very smart game, reinvesting in countries that the West has ignored so that they can secure their support and prevent them from becoming strong allies of the United States. Secondly, these investments have not only been about extracting natural resources, but also about building infrastructure and improving the lives of people across the continent. And this has given China a very positive reputation in Africa, a reputation that the West has struggled to match. And so as a result, China has emerged as the top investment destination in Africa, attracting nearly 3 times more investment than the United States since the year 2000. Now, it should be a red flag for Washington, because it shows that the U.S. has lost the trust of many African nations. We have a history of intervening in African countries and overthrowing governments that we don't like. And this has left many Africans feeling like the U.S. is only interested in exploiting their countries for natural resources and not really interested in building long-term relationships. And this is an opportunity that the Chinese are taking full advantage of. They're investing in Africa not only to extract natural resources, but also to build relationships and become a positive force in the region. Now, it's important to note that China's investments have not been without controversy. There are many people who argue that China is simply using its investments to further its own interests, and that it's not really helping Africa at all. They say that China is taking advantage of weak governments and extracting as much wealth as possible from these countries. And that's true. China is a ruthless capitalist nation. When it comes to their own interests, they will do whatever it takes to ensure that they come out on top. However, it's also true that China has helped to improve the lives of millions of Africans through its investments. And it would be naive to ignore the positive impact that China has had on the continent. At the end of the day, the relationship between China and Africa is a win-win situation. China gets access to the resources and markets it needs to grow, and Africa gets much-needed investment and development. Now, does that mean that the United States should just roll over and accept China's dominance in Africa? Absolutely not. I believe that the U.S. should continue to engage with African countries and try to build strong relationships. But it's important to recognize that the days of the U.S. having a monopoly on African investment are over. China has made inroads into the continent and they're not going anywhere. And so the U.S. needs to be smart about how it approaches Africa. We need to respect African nations and their leaders, and we need to show them that we're genuinely interested in building relationships, not just extracting resources. If we can do that, then maybe we can turn things around and start winning African nations back. But if we continue down the path of arrogance and interventionism, then I think it is very clear that China will continue to make inroads, and eventually, it might even overtake the U.S. as the dominant power in Africa. I hope this video has been helpful in explaining why Africa is the next geopolitical battlefield where the world's superpowers are going to clash and compete for influence. And it has also helped to explain why China has made such a significant investment in the continent and what this means for America's relationship with Africa. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.